In 1980, there was a secret study conducted on 3 innocent boys born identical triplets and separated at birth in the name of a science experiment. The study, led by Dr. Peter Neubauer, who cooperated with the Louise Wise Adoption Agency, was to test the theory of nature versus nurture and followed the triplets throughout their childhood living in New York. This experiment was a huge advancement in the study of twins and triplets and will help many scientists in the future, but also had a huge negative impact. Almost all of the subjects in the study had mental health issues, and there was more than one suicide. This study tested the boundaries of genetics and ended up having a greater negative impact than a positive one. So many lines were crossed, and the scientists put their work over the well-being of the subjects and their own personal ethics.
Robert, or Bobby Shafron, David Kelman, and Eddie Galland were born on July 12, 1961, and raised in Upper New York. Bobby was raised in an upper-middle-class family, David in a working-class family, and Eddie in a middle-class family. Each had different finances and a different living style. When they were all adopted, no information on them being triplets was given to the parents. The parents were also told that their kids were involved in an experiment for adopted kids, explaining the reason the kids were tested throughout their childhood. But this all turned out to be a lie. Bobby, David, and Eddie found each other in a sort of fairy tale fashion. Bobby arrived at a small community college in New York in 1980, only to find that everyone already knew him. People kept coming up to him and asking how he had been and patting him on the back. Girls were kissing him and people sharing gossip. It was only when someone came up to him and asked for his birthday and if he was adopted that he found out he had an identical twin that went to the same small little community college the year before. 24 hours later, Bobby was sitting in Eddie's living room in Long Island. The brothers were becoming a media sensation, and their story was only growing. An article on them and how they met was printed in the New York Times. Now the world knew their story. A week later, the third of the bunch, David Kelman, called the New York Times and claimed he was the third, and they were in fact triplets. After Bobby, David, and Eddie found each other, the media became obsessed with them.
They coincidentally discovered each other after having been separated at birth and raised by different adoptive families. Literally ran into each other by coincidence and couldn't help but notice, that guy looks a lot like me.
They were on 1,000 different news channels, in newspapers, and even in a movie. The media was fascinated by how the three boys were so like each other, but yet had only met a short period before. They all liked the same food, cigarettes, had the same thoughts, and even had the same taste in women.
We were so similar just looking at us, and then when we spoke to each other, we knew how similar we were.
It was almost like we were just confirming, are you exactly like me or aren't you? Exactly. Oh, yes, we are. And it was just pretty much that simple.
After blowing up, Bobby, David, and Eddie opened a restaurant called Triplets. Within a year, they were ranking in serious cash, and Triplets was only growing. They were on their way up, but everything took a turn when Lawrence Wright called Bobby, David, and Eddie and told him about a discovery he made. He was curious about why the triplets were separated and decided to look into it. After digging through boxes of research, he found a tape where he questioned Dr. Neubauer and took notes about his secret study. Lawrence found out that Bobby, David, and Eddie were not in a study for adopted children, but were in fact a study testing the theory of nature versus nurture. Lawrence called Bobby, Eddie, and David and told them how they were lab rats to the scientists.
After the parents found out that they were lied to and their children were used as lab rats, they were furious. They all went to Louise Wise and demanded information. But the agency lied and said it was an accident. After they left, one of the fathers had left his umbrella, so when he went back in, he saw the board celebrating, as if they had escaped a lawsuit. The agency later closed due to no trust. This story has many complications. We are still unsure of many things. Why did the agency work with Peter Neubauer? Was it money? A favor? Also, even though it was the 50s during the experiment, how and why did no one realize what they were doing was wrong on so many levels? These questions might never be answered.
But one thing we are sure of is that all the subjects that we know of had mental health issues in their lives, and there was even more than one suicide. Scientists believe this was because they experienced serious trauma when they were separated at birth from their siblings. In high school, all three of the boys had gone through issues, and they went through therapy. One of the mothers also commented that their son had hit his head against the wall until he passed out. Imagine being unknowingly separated from a part of yourself. It must have been traumatizing for them.
Did you ever actually sit down and just talk?
Once in a while, when we're not being St. Bernards, we can sit down and just talk.
This study, did have one good result in the end, though. It was a good advancement for the science world. Scientists now know not to separate twins and triplets at birth because of the long-term results and impact on mental health. Because of the negative impacts on the subjects, there will never be a study like this again. It's the first and last of its kind.
Some became very ill, as in mental health issues, but they also found each other. It changed their lives for the better because now they have each other. They can now share brotherhood like they never did before.
You have said that this has been the best year of your life.
Oh, we've
In
all
how
said the
many
same
ways?
because,
It's
well,
been an amazing year.
Tell me about it. Just,
Well, it's pretty unparalleled. I mean, meet your two identical triplets. You can't compare it to anything.
But the story is still a sad one. Bobby and David moved on with their lives, but still always had the constant reminder that they were just an experiment. Eddie's story didn't continue, like Bobby or David's. He decided to end it by putting a bullet through his head. The creators of the documentary finally were able to uncover the scientific documents from the study, but they are not yet released to the public. One of the victories is that the story has been shown and released to the current generations. Many people are now aware and trying to move in the right scientific direction without crossing so many ethical lines.